I want some more.
Well, asking for more CO2 in the world is akin to Oliver Twist here asking for more porridge. The entire establishment would be shocked, but this is what this video is about. But we shall first need to deal with some myths about climate change. And the first one is the existing climate model predictions. Well, one thing you can give them praise for is consistency. The models are consistently wrong and consistently overestimating the amount of heating. But there is one model coming from Professor William Happer that is consistently correct. It actually agrees with the observations from the satellites and agrees extremely closely. And that model states that when you double the amount of CO2 we've now got, there is no significant warming caused at all. Now, for clarification, there is no doubt at all that CO2 is a greenhouse gas, and there is no doubt at all CO2 has contributed to the warming of the planet. In fact, without CO2, the Earth would be 25% cooler, and that would cause us a shiver or two. So more CO2 must mean more warming, right? Wrong. As you add more CO2 to the atmosphere, it becomes less and less effective. It's a bit like painting a wall red. After the first coat and second coat, further coats, maybe 3 or 4, well, they make little difference. And it's a logarithmic scale of saturation. And basically, we're almost saturated on CO2. And so adding more simply does not cause the same effect as the earlier layers. But just who is Professor William Happer? And how do we know that his model is right? We'll take in that last question first. As we have already explained, his theoretical model agrees with satellite observations, so it passes the most fundamental test of science, which is agreement with the observations, unlike, of course, the alarmist models, which do not agree with the measured world. This is the paper describing the model. It's easy to check it. This work also demonstrates that methane and car emissions have little to no effect on climate change. They are completely masked by other factors. Now here is a cross-check on the work. This is the Antarctica model coming from the Happer paper. And what it shows is that there's actually more cooling in the Antarctic due to greenhouse gases than there would be without greenhouse gases. The exact opposite effect of what you would think. The red dotted line is a well-established line, established for over 100 years, of what would take place without any greenhouse gases at all. So anything above that red dotted line, like with the area I've shaded blue here, is actually exceeding what would be the case without any gases at all. So in other words, it is cooler in the Antarctic because of greenhouse gases than it is without them. That is such a remarkable theoretical conclusion and totally against what you hear from the alarmists, that you should demand I prove it. And just look across now to the actual observed. So forgetting all the theory of Happer and Associates, let's look at the observed. And the observed shows the same excess of cooling that can only be caused by greenhouse gases. And of course, there is a clear reason for this. It's the Antarctic temperature inversion. Unlike the rest of the world, where as you go up in height, it gets cooler. We know that from flying in aeroplanes. In the Antarctic, it's the opposite way around. As it goes up because of the cooling effect of the ice at ground level, it actually gets warmer, and the greenhouse gases help radiate the radiation to space. You don't have to believe me or Happer, you just have to believe the observed data. Of course, the same is true of the Arctic. And that is why, despite every prediction that it'd be gone by 2000, be gone by 2014, be gone by now, it still hasn't gone.
Another new study to be presented by U.S. Navy researchers later this week warns it could happen in as little as 7 years. 7 years from now. In the last few months, it has been harder and harder to misinterpret the signs that our world is spinning out of kilter.
Instead, people are surprised by the significant long-term cooling trend in the Antarctic. But now we have a reason. Now we understand why. William Happer is probably the world's #1 expert on the CO2 molecule. He is a physicist that has been in this game for years, even developing CO2 molecule lasers. He knows far more about CO2 molecule than any climate scientists, because climate science is in fact a very, very broad field. It covers everything from statistics to physics to every sort of environmental issue. And these people very often do not really know the subject. They know a broad range superficially, but not in depth. William Happer is different. He knows the CO2 molecule and its behavior inside out. And of course, all the multi-billion-pound alarmist world has to do to correct this and make them right and him wrong is prove that his paper is wrong. But they can't, because they would also have to prove that their own observations are wrong. We started this short video with Oliver Twist asking for more. And that is what we should be asking for with CO2. We need more of it. It'll greatly benefit the world. And here is why. According to a NASA study, CO2 produced an extra 10% of vegetation on Earth. That's an enormous amount of extra land, almost equivalent to 2 USA land masses, and achieved in just under 30 years. Of course, in professional greenhouses, they pump in CO2 to increase the plant growth. You can see here just the extent of this with extra CO2. And then here in the UK, we are witnessing record crop yields, a lot of which is due to CO2. There are the same record crop yields throughout the world, including Southeast Asia, Africa, South America, North America, etc. And NASA research has also found that the Sahara Desert has decreased in size by some 700,000 square kilometers. That's the same as adding a country the size of France and Germany together in a period of 30 years to Africa. The simple fact is that these days, climate realism is almost banned. Climate alarmists are not following the scientific principle of free and open free speech debate. My videos such as this are shadow banned on YouTube, and when I post videos based on peer-reviewed scientific papers on Facebook, they're simply deleted and marked as extreme. Instead, children such as Greta Thunberg are open to the world when they openly admit they have no science whatsoever behind their alarmism. I encourage everybody to check out the sources of my videos and reach their own conclusions. And if you do that honestly, you will then understand that the alarmism of today is completely false. Instead of giving you the scientific proof of what is going on, for example in Antarctica, which is observed by satellite and observed by field measurements in 41 field stations showing 40 years of continual and high cooling, no, you get reports like this. And of course this report comes from 1 day temperature on the peninsula from the Antarctic that sticks out towards South America, and suffers occasionally from a well-known meteorological condition where the warm air from South America gets swept over it. It is a 1 day event, and by the way, not even a record. But that 1 day event just discounts the satellite observations, the theory, and the 41 climate stations in Antarctica, all of whom have recorded 40 years.